question. I'm dealing with a lot of ethical issues at my current clinic and I'm experiencing burnout. I want to know what I can do to reduce burnout and transition myself out of the clinic without abandoning my clients.
So I think this is why we're bound by our ethical code is we have to be hyper aware of things that we're not comfortable with and things that, the board is not comfortable with. And it's challenging because there are a lot of I don't know what this situation is, but I do know that in the field there's a lot of businesses that run ABA like a business, and they're growing and they're scaling and they're becoming these like mega clinics where they're just kind of taking over, and they kind of lose sight of really what our goals are in providing ABA and ethical services and really improving the lives of children and families. So I do get it, and I think this is a valid concern. Um, and depending on what that concern is, I don't know what this situation is, but I think the first step would be bring it up, talk to your manager, talk to your supervisor. If it's someone who's not a BCBA or it does not have the same ethical code that you do, you may have to explain to them where you're coming from and have a copy of the code so that you can show them what your concerns are. Um, that would be the first step. If it doesn't go anywhere and if they say like kind of too bad, we don't really um, care, unfortunately, then yeah, I do think you would have to, possibly leave, transition out. But then the concern is your clients, right? What do you do with your clients? I think it's always challenging when we um, move positions or make changes, and it's usually the clients and the families who have to suffer because they're so dependent on their team and their professionals who really develop a very unique relationship. So unfortunately it does happen. Like that's just, we're human and we have to make changes. So I wouldn't, feel too badly about that because it is just reality sometimes for whatever reason that we do have to change our jobs. But definitely giving them enough notice and not doing it in a way that, feels kind of gross where you're talking bad about the organization, or I don't know what your rule is in terms of a non-compete, but a lot of places you wouldn't be allowed to take the families with you, which is valid. But you can explain to them in a way that would make it kind of neutral and clear, whether it's personal reasons or you got another opportunity. But definitely not getting involved, at least in my opinion. I wouldn't want to get involved in like a yucky, like, legal issue where I'm taking the families with me, or, I was bad talking the organization. I think do what you need to do for yourself and be as considerate as you can to the families, and find a place that you like working because they do exist.
Yeah. I think there was a few things that were brought up in here. Number one, the ethical issues, which Shira addressed. And number two, the burnout. And burnout is real. And I think we need to talk about that as well. I guess to go back to the ethical issues for a second, Shira, go back to the code. And, the code says is that if you're transitioning your clients or if you're leaving, you're not necessarily abandoning your clients, because like you just can't carry on that personal responsibility for life. Like at what point do you stop, right? But the code says that you're supposed to refer to another BCBA. So number one, look at your contract to see if there is a non-compete in there, because maybe you can take some of those clients with you. I would imagine there's a non-compete in there. But number two, if you really feel like that organization is horrible and you don't want to leave your clients with that organization, then you have that ethical responsibility to tell your parents, like, hey, here's some other BCBAs you can go to if you don't want to work within this organization. But what Shira said about like bad talking the organization you work with, there may be, some horrible things going on there, but you work for them. You did, or you're thinking about leaving them. You can't be bad mouthing them. You can't be. It's just not like, I find that ABA is a small field, even though it's growing and even though there's tons of clinics all over the US. People know people in the ABA world, and you don't want to ever burn bridges. Anyways, that's at least the way I work. Don't burn
Unless
bridges.
it's dangerous, unless like someone's at risk. I don't know that we're talking about that, but I think that's a whole nother topic. But like if there are really children at risk, then that's separate. But we're
And
talking about just stuff that you don't like.
good point. Good point. If it's something you don't like, then do whatever. If it's dangerous, if there is massive ethical issues that can't be, um, decided upon with a conversation or can't be resolved with conversation with your supervisor, that's when you can go to the BACB. I would contact John Bailey. He's got, it's called ABA Ethics Hotline. Just Google it, ABA Ethics Hotline. There's an email you can actually email, and he gets back to you within 24 to 48 hours. It's awesome. And you can talk to him about that, and then you can also talk to him first and then go to the BACB if it gets to that point as well. But in terms of the burnout, let's talk about burnout, because I'm sure that people may or may not be experiencing the ethical issues, but I would be lying if I said I hadn't experienced burnout. I think probably, I'm sure if I had to guess, 80% of us have experienced burnout. And, this past year, I guess year and a half with, COVID and everything else, like when we were in the midst of it, it's tough. And it's, how do you put on a smile and say telehealth is fabulous, and I really love wearing masks to work when I'm in person, and wow, it's really great that I can't get within 6 feet of you, and like, I'm being sarcastic, but that's tough, and that to me is burnout. So burnout is real, and I think the big message is it's okay to feel burnt out. I think what you need to do about it, everyone's different, but the way to handle it is to try and separate yourself from, okay, I'm burnt out, I hate my work, I hate my life, I hate everything, versus, okay, I'm burnt out, let's analyze this. What parts or what aspects is making me feel burnt out? So maybe if you guys are versed in ACT, do some type of self-reflection, like, what are my values? Why did I get into the field in the first place? How do I get closer to my values? What's bringing me away from my values right now? And really analyzing that. And how do you get back to your values? Can I work with some kids who I find really rewarding? Can I see if I can take off some of my load? Maybe somebody else can take part of my workload. Maybe I need to get up half an hour early and go for a run every morning because I need to do something for me. Maybe it's taking off 2 hours early if I'm allowed to do that, so that I can hang out with my kid after work. Just looking at that and seeing what is doable for you guys in terms of managing that burnout and making sure that you are taking time for yourself.
Yeah, and I like what you said also about analyzing our own behavior. Like, did we, at least for myself, sometimes I get myself into these situations where I don't have appropriate, borders or boundaries and guidelines, and I take on too much. And it's hard for us to say no sometimes because we just want to help the families. And taking a step back and saying, by taking this on, am I sacrificing my own well being, even though I want to help this family and I want to do the right thing? And I think a lot of us struggle with caseload sizes and feeling like, there's never enough time. And I think having strong boundaries and knowing what our limits are and understanding that there will be a role that respects that. You don't have to, be a martyr for the sake of the families that you work for. You could definitely have professional boundaries and still serve and help many people, because if you, it's like the oxygen mask, if you're struggling, you're not going to be able to help the other person.
I
So
was just thinking about that oxygen mask, right? When you're on an airplane, they always say put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others.
yeah, and I think we have to be really aware of that, especially with the demands that some of us face with caseloads and things like that. So really looking at, your own situation, it may not be the business's responsibility, but it is also our own responsibility to take care of that. But it's real. So, it's also on us to find the right place to work that respects us, that doesn't make us feel burnt out, and putting our own boundaries in place.